I need 3 volunteers. I need 3 volunteers. Everybody looks grand. Come on, 3 people. Otherwise I'm going to have to volunteer. Come on, Blair. Come on up. Come on, Ann. You'll do. You'll do. 1 each. Okay, what I want you to do is stick it on your finger and attempt to spin it. Hey, Blair's got it starting. It doesn't matter which way you go, I don't care. Okay, why are they falling off? Because we've no balance. All right. There, I'll put you out of misery. Thank you. And of course, we've been talking over the last couple of weeks about being well-balanced Christians in the areas of wisdom, commitment, and power. Wisdom, commitment, and power. And today, I want to talk about somebody else that wasn't very well balanced, and but they're not well balanced. Last week we were talking about Thomas, who had a large bit of wisdom, but not a lot of these. Well, this one we can see they're really strong in commitment, but they don't have a lot of wisdom and power. You know, somebody told me about the service last week. They said it was okay listening to you talk about Thomas because I'm not like Thomas, and so I didn't feel at all convicted. I'm going to be uncomfortable another week. And for some of you, guess what? This may be your week. This may be the week where you're going, oh, I can see myself here a whole heap more than I would like to. I want to turn to Luke 10, verses 38 to 42. I'll just move that back slightly so you guys can see. This is a story of commitment, a story of service, a story of obedience, and working as hard as you possibly can. And Jesus has got to be happy with that, isn't he? Luke 10, 38 to 42 says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet to listen to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and said, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by her myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. I want you to think about this situation. Jesus and his followers have come to Bethany, and they're going to spend the night with Mary and Martha and Lazarus. So far, so good. Hey, what a great honour to host Jesus. Jesus is choosing to stay in my house. This is wonderful. And then Mary gets what my husband lovingly calls pre-visitor stress syndrome. That's the part of me that was conditioned that since childhood that everything in my house had to be perfect before anybody can come through the door. And in my house it looks like vacuuming, cleaning and taking out the rubbish and putting away the things that stay on the kitchen bench that, stay on the kitchen bench 95% of the time, but if visitors come in that door, they've got to go away. Because you never let anyone see the mess that you live in most of the time. I have to tell you, if I let you into my house when it's in a normal state, you are either somebody that I know really, really well and trust, or I'm embarrassed. It's one of those two things. In Martha's house, the workload probably would have been a lot larger because she had these 13 hungry men to feed. 13 hungry men. That's a bit daunting, especially for those of us that don't like cooking much. The house had to be cleaned. There were no electric devices to help her. She had no vacuum cleaners and little UV things. There was food to be purchased. She had no fridge, so she couldn't prepare it all the day before. She had to go down to the market, buy the food, bring it home, and cook it. There was firewood to be cut so she could actually make a fire that she could cook it on. The food had to be cut up and prepared. There was no takeaway services in ancient Israel. And oh my goodness, I'm cooking for 15 people tonight. I need to make sure I don't run out. Can you see I've had practice at this? I might need to cook something extra. The table had to be set, the cushions had to be plumped, etc., etc., etc. And Martha was running around doing all of this. She's 100% committed. She's good at what she does. She serves. And then she looks over and sees Mary. Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. Now, Martha's already got all this adrenaline racing around her body because she's been having to run full stop all day. She's on high alert to get everything done and make sure everything's right and ready in time. And then she sees Mary sitting at the feet of Jesus. And she goes, "What?" I can imagine Martha at that point of time sort of giving Mary those looks. That didn't work. Martha's just totally absorbed in what Jesus is saying. Then it might have been over. And then that didn't work. I'll just slam down a few plates a little bit harder. That didn't work. And finally, Martha explodes. And it's interesting to me, she didn't explode at Mary, she exploded at Jesus. She goes, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all of the work by myself? Tell her to help me." You know, just like we saw in Thomas last week, Mary's greatest strength is also her greatest weakness. Her greatest strength is her commitment in here. Actually, hang on, that's not quite right. She does have a little bit of wisdom. Her greatest strength is her commitment, her willingness to serve, her obedience to this. But it's also her greatest weakness. Because it's not bad that that Martha has everything under control. We want to have everything under control. At some point, everybody wanted to have dinner that night. Without Martha, there wouldn't have been any dinner for Jesus and the disciples. You know, the Marthas in our congregation, they are the ones who unselfishly commit themselves to the hard work. They are the ones, when I say, "Hey, I need some volunteers to do this," they're the first ones to put their hands up so often. They're often the first ones to arrive and the last ones to leave. And if it weren't for the Marthas in our congregation, nothing would get done. You know, there's another story of Mary and Martha found in John 12, verses 1 to 3. This is a little bit later. This is just before the final Passover. And it says, "Jesus, therefore, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they made him a supper there. And Martha was serving, but Lazarus was one of those reclining at the table with him. And Mary took a pound of very costly perfume of pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus, wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of perfume." And what do we see again? There's Mary. She's busy running around. She's serving. And there's Martha running around busy serving. And Mary is sitting, worshipping at the feet of Jesus. There is something a little bit habitual about what is happening here. So how did Jesus deal with Martha? Well, he started with her strength. He started with her commitment. He said, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about so many things. He goes, I get it. You've got all of these things that you have taken on and you're worried, upset. But there's only one thing that is needed. Mary has chosen what is better and it will not be taken away from her. Which area did Martha need to grow in? She actually needed to grow in this area of power. This area of power that comes from just sitting at the feet of Jesus. Because what happens, and she also needed to grow in wisdom too, because if we don't have the wisdom to know when it's time and when it's time to work and when it's just time to sit at the feet of Jesus, we actually have to have that balance. We actually have to know both. People with a Martha attitude, they work really hard and they work and they work and they work, and sometimes they don't realise that what they need is just to stop and be at the feet of Jesus. Next week we're looking at Mary, and we're going to see a little bit of the opposite. But again, this is a balance thing, because several things happen when you work and work and work and you haven't spent that time. The first one is that you lose the joy of working for the Lord. And I think you can see this really strongly in Martha. Martha had lost the joy of serving Jesus. She had Jesus coming to her house. Who would not like to have Jesus come and sit and have a meal with you in your house? And to be able to sit in your lounge room and just sit and talk to him. I would love that. But Martha was so busy running around doing all the things that needed to be done, she missed this fantastic opportunity that she had just to sit at the feet of Jesus. Instead, she felt frustrated and she felt anxious. I have to say, you ever been like that? You ever looked at the church roster and gone, I don't want to have to go and do that. Or no, I have to serve again. Have you lost the joy of serving the Lord? You know, Brother Lawrence joined the monastery and he thought that he's going to spend his days in prayer and meditation, and they allocated him to the kitchen, and he was on cooking and clean-up, and a position that he frankly quite hated. And yet he decided that he was going to do everything there for the love of God and to pray and to have the grace to do his work well. And he wrote, "This time of business does not with me differ from the time of prayer. And in the noise and clutter of my kitchen, while several persons are at the same time calling out for different things, I possess God in as great a tranquility as if I was on my knees in blessed sacrament. For him, doing the dishes had become an act of worship. And he learnt the importance of doing all things as if he was doing them for the Lord." Jesus rebuked Martha, but it wasn't because she was getting dinner ready. He didn't say, hey, that's bad, you shouldn't be getting dinner ready. He knew that is a job that needed to be done. But it was her attitude that was the problem. You know, Charles Grierson says it this way. He says, Jesus blamed Martha not for her attentive service of love, but for allowing that service to irritate, agitate, and absorb her. I have a question for you. I want you to think about this. I want you to think about your service to God. Have you forgotten what a privilege it is to serve? is there an area where you need an attitudinal adjustment and find that joy of service all over again? The other problem with people that have this Martha attitude when it comes to wisdom is that they tend to push other people to work as hard as they do. You know, if I'm rushing around making, and look, I can so feel this one. We had dinner guests yesterday. And I have been working flat out on my doctorate for the last couple of weeks. And, you know, so Andrew had said that he would get the house ready. I was going to do dinner. And I'm doing it. I'm going, I'm not going to have time. I'm not going to have time to get all this ready. I'm not going to have time. And there's Andrew sitting up on the computer. Now, he had done his work. He had done everything that he was supposed to be doing. But I'm sitting there working, so I'm going, well, how dare you just be sitting around? I will say, I walked up and I said, could you please help me? And he did say yes, and he came downstairs, so, you know, but you know, I can give him a guilty conscience for sitting down after he has finished his work. We as Christians sometimes can give people a guilty conscience because I'm here in doing something so much and you're not, so therefore you're not working properly. You know, I'm so involved in the drop-in centre, and the drop-in centre is fantastic, and the drop-in centre is everything. Or actually, sorry youth guys, I'm going to pick on you, but this is often one that youth has. I'm doing youth, the youth is so important. Everything should be all about the youth. And if you're doing something else, it's not as important. And that's not true. That's not true. That's not wise. Because sometimes what you actually do, you do one of two things. You can give people a guilty conscience that they're not working hard enough, and they might be working in the strengths that God has given them. They are just different than the strengths that God has given you. And how dare we judge them? Or sometimes we do the opposite. Sometimes we actually discourage the people from doing the work because nobody can do it as well as I can do it. You know, I know what needs to be done, and it's just frankly much easier if I could do it myself. It is much quicker to do it myself than to teach somebody else to come alongside me and do it. And so you can run yourself ragged and then complain because nobody's helping you. I'm sure nobody here ever does anything like that. But that's not the way it should be. You know, everybody has a role to play in working in our churches. How dare we stop somebody experiencing the blessing of serving God and others? So where does Martha need to grow? Well, there's two areas that she needs to grow in. The wisdom to know how much to work and when to work. It's not that she can't work. That work's got to be done. But you've got to know how much to work and when to work. And when you've got Jesus sitting in your living room, then that might be a good time to go, it's time to sit at Jesus' feet for a little bit. If I am working constantly, then that is a problem. You know, it's also recognising the importance of the task. There are some tasks that need to be done, and they need to be done now. If I have a baby, they're not really good if you say to them, well, just hang on a minute, I'm just going to have an hour's quiet time with God, and then I will feed you and change you. That's not wisdom, is it? You know, we have to be wise about how everything works around. But equally, we have to go, it is really important for us to be spending the time just sitting at the feet of Jesus. Have we got that in our days? Are we doing that properly? And so then we talk about the power. And, you know, because we receive power. When we sit at the feet of Jesus and we learn from him, we receive power from the Holy Spirit. And if our balance has become lopsided, and then often what happens is we are using all of this and we are not taking in enough. And Keta and Lindsay, I'm going to ask you to come and help me. So Keta, you're going to be the Christian. You're going to be the person. Just come over here. Actually, stand up here so we can see. Okay, so Keta, I'm going to put my cup there. Lindsay, you're going to put your cup underneath Keta's, please. Okay, so I get as I spend time with God, the Holy Spirit pours into me. And what happens is that then comes out and allows me to do that strength and to do the work and to meet other people, right? But if I stop spending time with God, what's happened to my working? What's happened to the power that allows me to go out? It stops because it's dry. There's nothing. there's nothing left. Bigger hole, there'd be nothing left. Okay, thank you. So, we need to have the wisdom. It's so important that we have the wisdom to know when and where to work and when and where just to sit at the feet of Jesus. And we are gaining that power, that spiritual power that comes from just sitting at the feet of Jesus in worship and in praise. In your rivers, there is a picture of a seesaw, and it has a question. I want you to think, when it comes to work and worship, which way does your seesaw balance? Is it balanced across? Work and worship is the same, or are you more likely to jump into the work side? And I'm going to say for this, the side that you jump into is the one that's going to go down, okay? Do you jump more into the work side and you don't get enough of just that worship of Jesus in your life? Or maybe you jump more into the worship side and there are actually some services for God that you could do. I want you to think about that this week. Think about in your life, how balanced is this? Because it is pivotal for us going forward, that we are balanced in this work and worship area. One of the areas where we just get to come and worship is by taking communion, isn't it? Where we can just come in and go, I don't have to do any of the work. Jesus has done it all for us. But I get to come and experience that communion with Jesus Christ and God. So we're going to do that right now.